Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to Warhammer 40K Space Marines 1. This is an interesting game, y'all, because all these years later, we're getting a sequel, and it looks kind of lit, and it's also using the tech from World War Z, which had insane zombie hordes to kind of fill out this massive battlefield. I cannot wait to get my hands on some Space Marines too. So to prepare my body, I thought, you know what, I've heard just in passing down the grapevine, Maddie, you should check out Warhammer 40K Space Marines. The following video is sponsored by BetterHelp. One of the best things I learned through therapy is that talking to an unbiased source about the things you're struggling with in life itself can be one of the best things you do for yourself. That's because I feel when I'm bringing some of my issues to friends or family, they do have my best interest in mind, but maybe I'm not hearing exactly what I need to hear. And that's why I'm here to tell you about BetterHelp, because sometimes it's tough to find a therapist in your local area. And with this being all available online, you can talk to someone right now, today, and get that unbiased feedback that I think really does help you grow from some of the things you're struggling with. All you have to do is fill out a questionnaire and you're going to get matched with a therapist in as little as a couple of days. And one of the best features of BetterHelp is that if the first therapist doesn't feel like the right fit, then you can easily switch to another one until you find someone that you do connect with. It makes the very well-known hurdle of therapy a lot easier to overcome, and you just drop right in and just start working on yourself in the best way possible. And it's not just about one-on-one, there are group sessions. They also have journals that you can write in and reflect on, which I think is a great thing to do every day. So there's a lot of reasons to back BetterHelp, and if you want to go ahead and check them out, all you have to do is click the link in the description down below or head to betterhelp.com/retrorebound and you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy. So check them out, link down below. Shout out to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. Now, a little bit of backstory on this franchise. I have very surface level knowledge of this series. You know, I just play the games as they come along, what appeals to me, and that's really it. So, oh, I'm in the mood for a Horde mode game. I'll play some Vermintide or some Darktide. Oh, I'm kind of interested in this Doom game. I'm going to play Necromunda or whatever the heck it's called. Oh, I kind of like CRPGs. Rogue Trader looks cool. I'm going to add that to my wish list. And so on. Warhammer is home to a ton of games, a massive tabletop scene, books. This series knows no bounds. And so here we are with Space Marines, which oddly enough, the whole Warhammer universe kind of gave birth to Gears, and things are coming full circle with this game. So I thought it'd be fun to do a little retrospective here, talking about my time with Space Marines 1, what I learned with the story, because yes, we will be getting into spoilers, as this is all my first time playing it through, and get your thoughts down below, as we're only a few short days away from Space Marines 2. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here, and you're into nostalgic and retrospective content, you're in the right place, consider subscribing. Let's begin with the gameplay. So what you have here is a game that, like I said, is very clearly inspired by Gears of War. And for the most part, it's aged quite well, but it has its own identity too. So when I say it's got the Gears of War energy, you can see the Locust-alike enemies, you see the chainsaws, the blood and gore, how visceral this world can be, the way the camera even works over the shoulder of your main character, how linear it is, traveling around with fellow Space Marines like members of the COG, like, I don't know, it just really reminds me a lot of Gears. But when it comes to the gameplay itself, it does have a little bit of hack and slash energy. You have a light attack and a strong attack. You can mix these together to have combos, and you can pick up a ton of different melee weapons, which I thought was really cool. So it's not just the chain sword you have, but you can get like a massive hammer at one point in time, which I thought was absolutely sick and really bust some skulls with that thing. You can get a power axe. Each of them have their own different executions, and this game has a little bit of Doom energy to its credit. Before Doom was making it popular to execute enemies and get your health back, this game was really doing it here. And so yeah, when you want to get health, there's no pickups, which I kind of think there were certain encounters in this game where it would have fared better with a little bit of pickups for health. Yeah, it's all execution. So you get a real good incentive to get in there and get your hands dirty with some melee combat before you lean back on the third person shooting. And much like any Gears style game, it's all about the power weapons. So you'll be equipped with 4 weapons at any given time. Some of these can cycle out well. One of the quality of life enhancements that I feel was really missing here in Warhammer 40K Space Marines 1 is ammunition types. So you'll just like walk up to weapons and they'll say press X for ammo, and I'm like, well, what gun is it? And I'm looking at it and it's sometimes hard to tell. Some of the models look a little similar. Like there's little oversights in this game on that level that just kind of mount up over time, as I'll talk about with some encounters versus others. And this is just one of those instances where keeping track of like what weapons I had, or not being able to just swap out any weapon, but only particular types can swap with each other. Like I can only swap snipers with other snipers, but then sometimes they can swap with grenade launchers. It's a little weird at certain moments. It's inconsistent. It's hard to know what exactly I can and can't do. And worst of all, it kind of ruins the power fantasy at certain times, because this game will make you feel badass, but only when you play by very specific rules that don't make sense. Like, why can't I just kit out with the craziest weapons? I don't quite understand. Now, as you're progressing through this game, you're going to find different little chambers that are going to be holding new weapons for you to loot or upgrades. You have this thing called Fury that can also be upgraded. And basically what this does is, oh, there's a lot of orcs coming your way. Turn this thing on, everyone dies in one hit. You can sprint over enemies. Like, you just become an unstoppable beast. It also recharges your health, so it's a good get out of jail free card. If you're aiming down your sights, it'll actually sometimes slow down time. So there's a lot of options at your disposal, but most times what you're getting through here are weapons. And this is about a 6-hour campaign, so they do give you a steady amount of new weapons to loot. And I also appreciated that quite a bit. There was always something new to play with. I feel like this campaign had a really good pace in the terms of what you were doing. Sometimes they go back to the well, but I thought they switched it up enough to keep it entertaining. Like, the best parts, no doubt, were when they gave you the jump pack. It really unlocked the level design, gave you a lot more verticality. It also let you feel the power of the Space Marines as you were just dive bombing onto orcs and smashing them to bits. I thought that in particular felt really good. Where the game wavers a bit, especially toward the end game, is when they tried to ramp up the difficulty with boss-like encounters. I think either the balancing for some encounters was just not great, especially because the only way you can get health back is through melee kills and then executions, and some enemies just aren't built for that, and they'll fill rooms with those enemies, so you'll just die multiple times because you're kind of stuck in that old school way. And I thought that was a little bit unfair. Or, oh, this enemy is weak to this particular type of weapon, but I had to drop this weapon over here specifically to get this other weapon I liked, and so the loadout issues become a bit of a problem if I dare to play by my preference a little bit. So again, there were teething problems throughout, and I gotta say, as we'll get into with the spoilers when I get into the story section, that the final encounter in the game was kind of bad. Like, I just gotta be straight up. Like, I just thought it was a really underwhelming ending, and you could feel the game untangling a little bit over time. Like, those first 2 hours, you're like, all right, nice. Like, I'm steadily getting new stuff. It's feeling fresh and new. But even for a short game, it kind of starts to wear out just a little bit. But otherwise, it is incredibly satisfying to play as you're just mowing down these orcs. But the other thing I really appreciate is how well this first game is going to translate into the second game. One of the staples of the second game, it looks like, is using that tech from World War Z. For those who have never played a co-op zombie game that has insane hordes, like some of the craziest we've seen since Left 4 Dead. Like, it's a really great game if you have yet to check it out. But they're using that tech and bringing hordes in. And I thought this was just kind of a random evolution to make this game feel bigger and better, and naturally it fits, but it fits really well now because after playing the first game, there are moments where it's just creating a 1-on-1000 feel. And that's what a lot of this is about. You know, you open up the game and the story is pretty much depicting a hopeless situation where the Space Marines have been called in because they're fighting a war. For every like one of you and your people, there's like 1,000 upon thousands of orcs waiting for you. So I feel like what Space Marine 2 is doing is going to just carry that idea forward, but it really truly is here in the original. And I appreciated that a lot. The game makes you feel powerful when everything's clicking into place. Overall, when it came to other elements of the gameplay, the environment diversity is just not there. Like, this is a 360-ass 360 game. And by that, I mean that in the most adoring way, but also the most, like, stereotypical way. Like, I like me a good 360 game that's simple and to the point. But, like, every location in this game is brown, brown, brown. Like, there's no real color palette diversity here. It's just going to be brown the whole way through. That's the 360 for you. Some games handle it better than others. Like, there's games I think of, such as Fallout 3, that handle the brown and greens a lot better than games like this, where the brown just becomes a bit tiresome and a bit boring. At the same time, I don't think every single video game needs to be vibrant and full of like purple, pink, green, blue, all that stuff. But I do feel like slightly different hues in the color palette would have gone a long way in making some of these environments feel a little different. But eventually they do start to blur together, and it's hard to tell between like a factory, a sewer, and a battlefield and how you're actually making any visible progress. I should also mention, I played all of this on a Steam Deck, so if you're looking to catch up and catch up quick, this is a good way to do so. I downloaded it on my Steam Deck, and it translates really well over there. There were no adjustments I had to make outside of when it opens up, the resolution is in more of a 4:3. You change it to 16:9. It fits the Steam Deck perfectly, plays on the Steam Deck perfectly. I beat it in 2 sessions, one flying to LA, the other flying back. It worked beautifully. There is more, like the story, which we're going to go full into spoilers, but otherwise, we do have a complete box experience. By the way, not a cheap one, like $50 for a 360 copy complete in box that actually looked decent here for Space Marines 1. So let's take a look at what's on the inside. And here we have Warhammer 40K Space Marine on the Xbox 360. Relic and THQ, how about that? Not who you typically expect on the front of a game like this. And on the back of the box, it says, I am war. Love this shot here. We also see it says, enter a grim, dark future. Experience the rich and violent brutality of the Warhammer 40K universe. Storm into battle. Step fearlessly into the heart of combat as an unstoppable Space Marine. And at the bottom, take the battle online, customized Space Marine chapter, or Chaos Space Marine Warband. And so, yeah, that is another element of this game that we kind of can't cover just because, well, no one was online. I went ahead and checked, but yeah, no one was playing Space Marines here in 2024 in multiplayer. So on the inside, what you have is the manual and the disc art manual, front cover art, all matching up. Let's take a look at this manual though, shall we? Is it illustrated is the big question. The answer is unfortunately no, but there is a lot of content here at least. So what they have for you are combos. Yes, there are different combos for different melee weapons depending on what you have. They all follow a similar scheme, but they all do different things. Like this is an area of effect. This is also an area of effect, and so on. So there is a little bit of differences in what melee weapons you have. They have a quick breakdown of the story up here, saying it is the 41st millennium and there is only war. The enemies of man, including the savage and bloodthirsty orcs and other dark and dangerous forces, wage constant war against the descendants of Earth, seeking to end their very existence, and so on. So there's a little bit of a setup there in case you need some background stories. You have the options, the multiplayer, the difficulty, all that fun stuff. Not much to be said on the multiplayer, again, with no experience, but it does seem to be the main meat of the game because the campaign's pretty short, all things consider. And then you have over here promotion for the Death Watch. It's a role-playing game where you join the elite Brotherhood warriors and face hostile aliens and foul demons in the Jericho Reach. So yeah, just they always have content. Like, what's this? Kill Team, that's another one. Like, there's just so much here. Ultramarines movie, okay. Like, I didn't even know half this stuff existed, man. It's just such a dense franchise. And on the back, you have your Elite Pass code, which is, yeah, the multiplayer code. Remember when you had to use to put these in to be able to access multiplayer? They had online passes they sell to you. So yeah, pretty interesting complete in box experience there for Warhammer 40K Space Marine. So as for the story, I will say I feel like this game on a gameplay level ends at the right time where it was starting to get a little annoying and a little tedious, but narratively it ends when it's about to begin. And I could see how absolutely exciting it would have been to have played and beat this game, really enjoyed it, and then wondered when a sequel will come around. And now here we are like 14 years later, and we're actually getting a sequel. Because yes, to jump to the end completely, this game does end on a bit of a cliffhanger, because there's a whole question on why Titus didn't necessarily react to the warp, and it means that he might be tainted. And so there's this religious overtone that seeps into the story at times, and this is when it was at its most prevalent, this kind of combative relationship between the Inquisitors as well as the Space Marines, and how also the Space Marines are treated like gods on this battlefield. Like, they're calling Titus my lord, and it's like a common soldier talking to a commanding officer. And I just thought that relationship with the game and religion was really interesting, and I can't wait to see in the sequel how they explore that more. But really the best thing I can say about the game is where it ends narratively. It has you wondering, like, Titus got betrayed at the end. Like, what happens next? And there clearly were plans to make another one, so to continue it all this time later, I really do hope it delivers. But there's also a lacking of developing side characters here that are compelling. Like, I could not begin to remember their names, but you have 2 officers who are traveling alongside you. I only remember one of them because they betrayed me. The other one ends up being killed by the main antagonist. You do have an Inquisitor that you link up with at one point down the road, and it's very, very, very much telegraphed to you that this dude is up to no good whatsoever. And so as you're trekking along and you find out that he's just trying to bring in demons basically from a whole other universe, and now it's this war between like orcs, demons, and humans, and it's a really cool conflict premise, but I feel like the game was sort of crunched down by the amount of runtime it had. There could have been, I think, moments to build these characters more, because there are times in certain cutscenes throughout where you'll see these characters interacting, you'll see that bond growing, but a lot of the game is almost like a Gears feel with trying to make Titus the Master Chief. And by that I mean Master Chief on a writing standpoint functions on a less is more set of fundamentals. So when Chief speaks less, everything he says has more weight and impact. So a lot of times everyone around Titus is talking, it'll be like, we continue forward. And that's really it. I think it falls flat here though, because the surrounding characters or the plot at times isn't as interesting. And so he as a main character is just sounding as flat as the rest rather than delivering something compelling. There's also points like during one of his comrades' deaths, or when there's a little bit of concern on the battlefield, the actors and actresses' talents and their ability to elevate and kind of raise the scene feels a little flat. I would say my favorite points in the story were the ones where the most time was given to these characters to just kind of do their thing. Like when the Inquisitor betrayed the Space Marines, you could see how they're running this private experiment and it's all going south. And a lot of this, again, just brings in those religious overtones that really aren't explored again until the end of the game. The end of the game, unfortunately, concludes on what feels like a horde mode battle, which, by the way, I struggled quite a bit with. And I just didn't like how a lot of these encounters would throw me into the thick of a ton of enemies running at me and other enemies shooting at me with very little cover. And by the way, this isn't even like a cover-based shooter. You just kind of tuck behind cover and it's there placed for you to just sit behind, but you don't actually take cover and pop out and shoot and remain at least partially covered. So there's a lot of gameplay design elements that get exposed, particularly in this final battle, and then it kind of ends on a QTE. And the best thing about that ending is the setup for the next game, which made me narratively way more excited. So pretty much the order of events here is really simple. You drop into a massive conflict, you're kind of like the last ditch effort, you start cleaving through these orcs, you pick up this Inquisitor, you're trying to figure out what this device he has is and what it's for. Turns out it has access to the warp, which is, by the way, a very heretical thing to be in contact with. So now the Inquisitor's intentions are in question, but in more question is Titus, because when he interacted with the warp, he was untainted by it, which everyone thinks means that he is tainted by the warp and that he may be, you know, like a demon or something. Like they're kind of foreshadowing something along those lines. And so now we know the Inquisitors were working with the demons and this gentleman named Nemeroth, who's kind of off screen for most of the game. So now we basically have to try to end this all by taking out Nemeroth, stopping his plans, and you manage to successfully do so, but at a pretty big cost. So it's a pretty simple story. You also have servo skulls that you can collect around the world, which serve as audio logs and fill in some of the interactions between characters, and I thought those were pretty good. But really what I was left feeling is like I played a very long prologue to a game. And so I'm very keen to see how Space Marines 2 explores things, how they go bigger and better, and do they spend more time with these characters and develop them further, because that felt like the most missing component. When this game did pause and focus on its characters, I actually thought it was pretty dang good, but it was just a couple of skips here and there, definitely limited by development time, technology, that sort of thing that I feel can be totally unleashed in Space Marines 2. So here's hoping it delivers. But ladies and gentlemen, those are my thoughts on Space Marines 1 and my first time going through it. Like I mentioned, there is multiplayer. Didn't get the chance to check that out, so it's really just the campaign and you're done. So let me know your thoughts on this game down below, and with that, I will catch you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace